Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
What is the difference between CoQ10 and Ubiquinol? This is a question that comes up on a frequent basis and people just really want to know. Is CoQ10 the same thing as Ubiquinol, or is Ubiquinol somehow like a superior type of CoQ10? Well, today I want to break all of that down for you. I want to talk about some science behind Coenzyme Q10 in the Ubiquinol form. So let me make that disclaimer there. I'm going to talk about CoQ10 in the Ubiquinol form. So that's kind of a hint as to where today's podcast is actually going. I want people to understand really when it comes down to how the body is utilizing Coenzyme Q10, and that CoQ10 is actually made in the body. That's another little fun fact, but I'm going to get into all of that today. I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and let's get right to it. Let's talk about CoQ10. What in the world is CoQ10? That is Coenzyme Q10. This is a substance that helps the body to convert food into energy. And coenzyme Q10 is found in almost every single cell within the body. And we also know it is a very powerful antioxidant. Now, coenzyme Q10, is a member of the ubiquinone family of compounds. So when we think about ubiquinol, okay, so we're in this family of ubiquinones. So CoQ10 just by itself falls into the ubiquinone category. But then when we have the reduced, really powerful antioxidant form, that is ubiquinol. So that's where that difference comes into play. And when we're supplementing, we ideally want to be using ubiquinol, that reduced, highly absorbable form of coenzyme Q10. Now, what do we know about CoQ10? And what do we know about this class they fall into, this family of ubiquinone compounds? Well, what we know is that coenzyme Q10, the ubiquinone, refers to this ubiquitous presence of these compounds within living organisms. And it's defining their actual chemical structure, which contains this functional group known as benzoquinone. And the ubiquinones are a fat-soluble molecule. And what we know is that ubiquinone is found in humans. And we recognize that as CoQ10 or coenzyme Q10 because it has these 10 isoprene units to it. So I'm not going to get too heavy into the chemical structure of this, but what I do want people to understand is that the way that our body utilizes coenzyme Q10 is really in its functionality. It's required within the mitochondria for ATP synthesis. So this is the energy. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. We also know that CoQ10 functions as an antioxidant within the cell membranes as well as lipoproteins. So we know, what about antioxidants? We know that antioxidants help to fend off damaging particles that are in the body known as free radicals. We know that those free radicals can damage cell membranes. They can screw up our cellular DNA. They can even create a situation where the cell itself dies. So we know that antioxidants are very important. And we also know that antioxidants such as coenzyme Q10 can help to neutralize these free radicals. And this is why we find coenzyme Q10 ubiquinol, because remember, the ubiquinol form is a really powerful antioxidant. And so researchers have analyzed the way that the body utilizes coenzyme Q10. Remember, this is something that's actually made in the human body. So oftentimes, you'll hear doctors say, oh, you don't need to take coenzyme Q10. That's just some goofy supplement. And I always say, it's something goofy in the sense that you can test it in your blood. Then I would have to argue with that because coenzyme Q10, you can do a blood test and you can see what your actual CoQ10 level is. So for me, coming from the world of science and medicine, I just sometimes want to like bang my head up against a wall and say, why is not every single doctor out there, especially cardiologists, test for CoQ10 levels? Because if you recognize that your CoQ10 levels are low, the body isn't making enough coenzyme Q10, which means you can't make enough cellular energy, which means you don't have enough antioxidant, which means that your cells are struggling. Why do they not look at that? That is the $1,000,000 question. We can look at University of Maryland and the way that they kind of break down coenzyme Q10 in terms of supplementation. And what we know is that studies with coenzyme Q10 have been shown to be really important when it comes to cardiovascular health, when it comes to the way that the body responds to heart attacks. They've been able to show that people who take coenzyme Q10 are much less likely to have a heart attack. They have done extensive studies when it comes to heart failure, recognizing that coenzyme Q10 is required for that mitochondrial energy production. And you take someone who has heart failure, their heart has no ability to actually generate energy. We've looked at how coenzyme Q10 works in terms of the stabilization of blood pressure when it comes to fending off oxidative stress that can be damaging within our cholesterol, creating a situation where you have oxidized LDL, which is your low density lipoprotein. Certainly it's been studied across the spectrum when it comes to different metabolic disorders. In diabetics, for example, they've been able to detect that low levels of coenzyme Q10 can be extremely detrimental to a diabetic's health. Not only because of that greater likelihood of cellular damage throughout the body when you think about the nervous system, the kidneys, the heart, but when we think about the energy once again. And we look at CoQ10 and we say, okay, it's found throughout the body and is needed for cellular energy production. It's this very powerful antioxidant. And we realize that in the absence of CoQ10, the body struggles. So I want to talk about a few different studies that show the power of coenzyme Q10. And one study in particular that was done out of the University of Sydney a couple of years ago, I wanted to mention this study because I thought it was really fascinating. They were talking about how a simple molecule could prevent or alleviate prediabetes. So you take these people who are insulin resistant or who have metabolic syndromes, fall into that category of being a pre-diabetic. And we know in this country, there's 80 million pre-diabetics. And this particular study was done over at the University of Sydney, but in conjunction with researchers at Duke University. And they found that concentrations of CoQ10, so when they say concentrations of CoQ10, what exactly are they talking about? The blood level. So kind of what I just was talking about, why don't doctors test your CoQ10 levels? But in this research study, that's what they did. They were looking at their CoQ10 levels, and they found that to be lower in insulin-resistant body fat, which is really fabulous find. Why is that? Because if the body is lacking that CoQ10 and we are having a situation where the body fat continuously keeps disrupting the pancreatic function because of that imbalance of cortisol and insulin, and this is all brought on because of the lack of adequate CoQ10, then that seems like a pretty darn easy fix. And they said replenishing CoQ10 could prove invaluable for a preventive measure in pre-diabetics, as well as in other conditions such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia. Now, when you're supplementing with coenzyme Q10, we want to make sure we take the best type possible, which is going to be ubiquinol, that highly absorbable form, that powerful antioxidant form of coenzyme Q10. Now, luckily for you, the form that we use is ubiquinol, and we actually use a registered trademark form known as Canica QH, and it is the power of the Canica QH that allows us to have such confidence in our formulation because it has been studied in human clinical trials. And we see the impact that can have on vascular endothelial function. For example, in the Journal of Atherosclerosis, they were looking at the effects of CoQ10 on the way that the blood vessels were actually functioning. And we know in atherosclerosis, what happens is you get this stiffening within that vessel wall. And they did a study where they were looking at this analysis of all of these ways in which coenzyme Q10 could help to optimize and improve upon endothelial function. And they found that CoQ10 supplementation was associated with a significant improvement in endothelial function. And the current study supports a role for CoQ10 supplementation. And we see these studies time after time showing the impact that CoQ10 supplementation can have for our overall health. Now, here's an interesting study that I just wanted to point out, because this is more geared towards the antioxidant properties that coenzyme Q10 has. And this was published in the Journal of Biofactors. And they were looking at ubiquinol supplementation and how that can actually reduce oxidative stress that was associated with strenuous exercise in healthy adults. Why is this study so important? Because you're taking a group of healthy individuals that works out on a regular basis, but we know that in the act of working out, this can actually generate additional free radicals in the body. So the objective of this study was to determine if giving these people who are considered to be healthy and are exercising all the time ubiquinol, if that would actually prevent oxidative stress. And so they took a group of 100 healthy, well-trained athletes, and they had them in two different groups. One was given ubiquinol, the other group given a placebo. And they were assessing their oxidative stress that was induced by strenuous activity. And what they found in just 2 weeks, the group given the ubiquinol, they were giving them 200 milligrams per day of ubiquinol, that they had a significant decrease in oxidative stress. They had an increase in their plasma nitric oxide. Why is that important? Because that meant that they were getting better tissue perfusion of oxygenation out to the extremities, to the muscles, to the heart, everywhere. Because the less oxidative stress, the more proper body function was actually occurring at that cellular level. And they said that the fact that this study showed that this could improve endothelial function, the energy supply, and muscle recovery in and of itself speaks volume. And I think these are the things that I like to focus in on when people question, well, do I actually need CoQ10? I'm healthy. Do I need to take coenzyme Q10? Well, it's like with so many things in our body. As we get older, and because of the amount of stress and the amount of exposures that our human bodies are exposed to throughout our lifetime, it's always advantageous to replenish things that we know can be lost. So when we look at collagen and we know collagen levels go down, what do? We replenish. Same thing with coenzyme Q10. But with CoQ10, one thing that we can do is we can start to have our serum levels tested. You can look and see how much CoQ10 is actually in my body. And if it's low, well, then that's a big, red flag. Hello, yeah, we need to be supplementing with coenzyme Q10. And across the spectrum, we have recognized the impact that CoQ10 is really playing. The underestimated importance of coenzyme Q10, it goes well beyond cardiovascular health, well beyond neurological health. Remember, coenzyme Q10 is in high demand in those areas that have high energy output, so the heart and the brain. But an interesting study also showed the effects of ubiquinol supplementation on inflammatory cytokines. So they took a group of people who have rheumatoid arthritis, and they gave them coenzyme Q10. So this was a double-blind placebo-controlled trial, and they wanted to look to see if supplementation with CoQ10 would do anything in terms of lowering the amount of inflammation occurring within these folks. And they found exactly that. This study showed beneficial effects of CoQ10 supplementation on inflammatory cytokines and oxidative stress in rheumatoid arthritis patients. This was published in the Archives of Medical Research Journal. So this shows you that there are reasons why we come equipped with these things in our body. There's a reason why we have coenzyme Q10 that's naturally occurring and what its true function actually is. It's like when we think about vitamin D and all of the many functions of vitamin D in the body. Coenzyme Q10, we are finding more and more about its true functionality and understanding the way that it is working to not only maintain cellular energy production and its role as an antioxidant, but it goes well beyond that, that it's actually working in terms of easing inflammation, which is why when you think about the heart, why it's just so darn important, which is why a study that came out of Europe about close to a decade ago now, that they talked about coenzyme Q10 is actually being a drug. They said the first drug to significantly improve heart failure mortality in over a decade. And they are not talking about a pharmaceutical drug. They are talking about coenzyme Q10. They said CoQ10 occurs naturally in the body and is essential for our survival. And they said CoQ10 levels are decreased in the heart muscle of patients who have heart failure. And within their study that they did over in Denmark, they were able to determine that patients who were treated with CoQ10 had significantly lower cardiovascular mortality, had a lower occurrence of hospitalizations due to having heart failure. That study in and of itself speaks to the true importance of coenzyme Q10. So whether you call it CoQ10 or if you call it ubiquinol, it is just so important to the way that our body ages, and we have to have adequate coenzyme Q10. So I definitely encourage you to go to our website and check out our ubiquinol formulations. Remember, we use a registered trademark form that has been utilized in human clinical trials known as Canica QH. It is made here in the United States, which is so incredibly important nowadays to make sure that the quality and the purity and the efficacy of all of these nutrients that you are using have been tested and shown to be beneficial. So I definitely encourage you, go to our website, check out our CoQ10 Ubiquinol formulations. That is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health, and we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.